Max Weber, one of the greatest thinkers in sociology, left us one of the most powerful and disturbing metaphors for understanding modernity, the iron cage. He observed that, with the advancement of rationality, the kind based on calculation, efficiency and bureaucracy, human beings began to be trapped in an increasingly rigid, cold and impersonal system. This cage is not made of physical bars, but of rules, routines, hierarchies and norms that govern our lives. These are the bureaucratic structures that permeate work, politics, economics, and even social relations. Weber realized that, although rationality brought progress and organization, it has a dark side: the alienation of the individual within ruthless systems. At the beginning of the 20th century, when Weber developed this idea, Western societies were already dominated by administrative machines that made the functioning of the state and companies more efficient but more inhumane. Today, this iron cage metaphor is more relevant than ever, as technology and automation have further rationalized life. Weber's iron cage represents the imprisonment of the individual by institutions and systems that operate according to impersonal rules and mechanical logic. It is a metaphor that highlights how the search for efficiency and control can transform society into an invisible prison where freedom and creativity are sacrificed. Weber did not condemn rationality per se, but he warned of the dangers of its absolute dominance. Within this cage, human beings come to be seen as functional pieces, workers, bureaucrats, consumers, and lose their uniqueness and spontaneity. The process of rationalization leads to the standardization of behaviors, routines, and even thought. This rationalized structure is virtually impossible to avoid in the modern world, since it is what sustains the social and economic order. But for Weber, the real problem is that this order is costly. The human soul, freedom, and the deep meaning of life are trapped in this cage, unable to express themselves fully. Bureaucracy is the main agent of the iron cage. According to Weber, bureaucracy is a system of administration based on hierarchies, clear norms, specialization of functions, and fixed rules. Although effective in organizing large structures, it has devastating side effects for the individual. The bureaucratic employee is not valued for his creativity or uniqueness, but for how well he can follow rules and perform functions in a predictable and repetitive way. This leads to a loss of sense of purpose and a feeling of alienation. The bureaucratic system creates an environment where the human being is reduced to a cog. In everyday life, this bureaucracy stifles freedom with piles of forms, standardized processes, rigid deadlines, and constant supervision. The iron cage is, therefore, an invisible prison built by rules that seem neutral, but which imprison the essence of the human being. Weber saw that as rationality took over institutions, the individual suffered a profound alienation. This alienation is not only material, as in the Marxist sense, but above all, spiritual and existential. Modern human beings feel increasingly disconnected from themselves, from others, and from the meaning of life. Living within a system where everything is calculated, predicted, and regulated, the individual loses the ability to act spontaneously and create meaning. Decisions are made based on rules and technical interests, not on values or emotions. This creates a void that affects mental health, motivation, and interpersonal relationships. This alienation is one of the great hallmarks of modernity, because despite material comfort and organization, the feeling of suffocation and emptiness grows. The iron cage imprisons not only the body, but the soul, crushing the human essence. The iron cage is also linked to the phenomenon of the disenchantment of the world, another central idea of Weber. As scientific and technical rationality advances, the world loses its magical, mystical, and symbolic dimensions. Mystery and charm are replaced by logical and calculated explanations. This means that life becomes more predictable, but less inspiring. Belief in supernatural forces, myths, and rituals that once gave meaning to existence is replaced by data, statistics, and natural laws. While this scientific progress is fundamental, it also leaves humanity without the emotional and spiritual supports that have nourished traditional cultures. Thus, the disenchantment of the world is an aspect of the cage that corrodes the human being's capacity to marvel, to dream, and to feel part of something greater. The rationality that frees thought can imprison the heart. Paradoxically, the iron cage emerged in the context of societies seeking greater freedom and rationality. Weber realized that while rational institutions had enabled progress and formal autonomy, they had also created a new type of prison. Modern freedom has become, in many ways, an illusion. People have more legal rights and access to services, but they are trapped in systems that regulate everything they do. The sense of autonomy is lost in the face of bureaucracy, routine, and the pressure to meet social and professional expectations. This paradox highlights one of the greatest dilemmas of modernity: how to reconcile the need for order and efficiency with the search for a full and free life. The answer is not simple, but Weber invites us to reflect on the limits of rationalization and the importance of preserving humanity in the midst of it. With the advance of modernity, rationalization did not stop at bureaucracy. It advanced into all areas of life, including the economy, politics, education, and even the personal sphere. Weber warned of the risk that this extreme rationalization could transform the world into an impersonal machine, where dehumanization is inevitable. The capitalist economy, for example, operates according to the logic of profit, efficiency, and productivity, often ignoring the well-being of individuals. In politics, decisions become technocratic and distant from the common citizen. In education, knowledge can be reduced to data for testing, and in personal relationships, communication can become superficial and instrumental. This trend widens the iron cage and deepens the individual's distance from his or her human essence. Weber draws attention to the danger of losing touch with what really matters: values, meaning, and connection. Despite the strength of the iron cage, Weber believed that resisting it was possible, albeit difficult. Resistance begins with critical awareness of the problem and the search for spaces where human beings can express themselves authentically. This resistance can manifest itself in the arts, philosophy, spirituality, and practices that value subjectivity and creativity. Questioning bureaucratic logic, seeking new models of social organization, and cultivating genuine human relationships are ways to escape, even if only partially, from the rational prison. However, this struggle requires courage and perseverance, as the system is powerful and constantly renews itself. The contemporary challenge is to expand this resistance so that rationality does not become synonymous with oppression. In the 21st century, the iron cage has become even more complex with digital technology. Algorithms, social networks, surveillance, and automation increase control over people's lives, creating more sophisticated, invisible prisons. Human behavior is monitored, analyzed, and directed by systems that operate according to the logic of efficiency, profit, and control. Individual autonomy is threatened by mechanisms that shape preferences, opinions, and even emotions. Thus, Weber's metaphor becomes even more disturbing. We are not only trapped in bureaucracies, but in technological systems that penetrate our intimacy and limit our freedom of choice. The future of humanity depends on our ability to understand and confront these new forms of the iron cage. Max Weber left us an essential legacy to help us understand the risks of unbridled rationality. His iron cage is not only a critique of the past, but a warning for the present and the future. In an increasingly automated and bureaucratic world, the challenge is to preserve the human soul. Weber's call is for us to be aware of the invisible prisons that surround us, and to fight for spaces of freedom, creativity, and meaning. Progress must be a means to human fulfillment, not a sentence of imprisonment. Thus, knowing and reflecting on the iron cage is the first step towards rewriting the history of modernity, seeking a balance between reason and humanity, efficiency and soul, control and freedom.